I would like to ask you something simple tonight. I want to find out how do you write? How do you know that a new novel is about to be born? And what tools do you use to bring it to the world? Do you happen to be old-fashioned and use pencil and crayons, maybe, or maybe you are high tech and you use computers and I don't know those other things. I must say that until several years ago, David Grossman was one of the small number of people in the world who do not have a mobile, and he did not use email for a long time. Now he's better than I am. I still don't have one. I mean, a mobile phone, but I'm learning from him. So maybe I'll get one the next time we meet. So tell me something about how do you begin your novel.
Shalom, good evening to all of you. Thank you for coming, and it's going to be quite a physical challenge with all the heat here, but let's try to go through it together. And first I want to thank you, David, not only for the nice things that you said about me, and that I can repeat them word by word regarding yourself, but somehow I think that probably in one of my previous metamorphoses, Gilgulim in life, I must have done something really good to deserve to have David Albahari both as a friend and as my translator, and it is a great privilege. You asked, David, about how do I write. Of course, first it's you have to have an idea, and ideas come in so many ways, and usually in an unexpected way. It can come in a dream, it can come in a conversation on the street that I eavesdrop on, it can come from something I hear on the radio, it can come from a talk at home near the kitchen table, and suddenly there is an idea and it feels strong. And how do we know it all? Not only writers, but every one of us. How do we know when suddenly we face a good story that is different from the millions of facts and data that are pouring towards us in every day? And I think that a good story is known by two criteria. One is that it falls into a place in our mind, in our heart, that as if was awaiting it. We feel that, even if it never occurred to us before, but suddenly it is ours and it creates something within us. And the second criteria is that it also creates immediately the urge to share it with others, to tell it to others. Immediately, because we have now mobile, immediately we call our wife, our friend, our children. You won't believe what I just saw. Yes, immediately we understand that there is a story here. Of course, a story that can be the base for a whole novel must be something deeper and with more echoes than just an event that we saw on the street. I suddenly have an example for a beginning of a story that was so clear to me. It was 17 years ago, and I was just after a novel that I wrote. It is called Be My Knife. It's an epistolar novel about a man and a woman, and both of them are married to other spouses, but they see each other and they start to correspond, because the man does not want to have any physical contact with her, because he doesn't want to fall into the cliche of love affairs, as he said. He just wants to have a story with her. He says, with you I don't want a story on the side, with you I want a story. And he starts to send letters to her, and she answers him, and it was a very tough and tormenting love story between them. And when I finished it, I was really crushed. And I all the time I thought, I want to write a good love story that would flow, will not be with all the obstacles that these two lovers from the previous book that they have put upon themselves. So I had the urge, but I just did not have any idea. And one day, it was January, I remember it was quite cold, and I went out of my home. I live in Mevaseret, which is 10 minutes away from Jerusalem, and I was about to enter my car when suddenly a man dressed in blue coat, leading a dog with a leash, he approached me and he said, "Excuse me, do you know this dog?" Now, immediately, even this question I was never asked such a question. Do I know a dog? And I said, no, why do you ask? He said, please, have a second look. So I looked again, it became even more weird. And I said, you know, I think I know all the dogs in our little street here, but this one is not familiar. Why do you ask? And he gave a sigh and he said, you see, this is a lost dog. It went astray, and I follow it because I believe that it might lead me to his owner, and I follow it from 8 in the morning. It was something like 12 o'clock. Now I was struck by such an act of grace, and especially in Mevaseret where I live, which is not very common. And I said, why would you do that? And he said, I said, chapeau, you know, really such greatness. And he said, what chapeau? I work in the municipality here, and this is how we find the owners of lost dogs. We just follow them, and believe me, he says, when I find the owner, he will have to pay a fee for... really, it's a true story. And he showed me there was a form number 76, a form, printed form, and the fee, which was then something like 120 shekels. And I remember I entered my car, and I sat and I felt like, you know, honey from heaven falling on me, because what a wonderful idea for a story, that the main locomotive of the story will not be a human being, but a dog. And I thought, okay, maybe the dog will belong to a woman. And the man will be, who chases the dog will take the man to this woman, but not directly, because then I would not have a story. It would be a very short story, and I wanted a novel. So the dog will lead this man through different places in Jerusalem, and in every station he will meet another person who slowly and gradually prepare him for the meeting with the owner of the dog. And this was the beginning of a book that I wrote that is called Someone to Run With, Mishehu Lorutz Ito. And this book gave me a lot of pleasure, because I felt I was chasing it like the man chasing the dog. You know, I just had not to interfere, just to allow the story to lead me. And I think this is something we both know from our writing, not to impose ourselves on the story, to let the story unfold, reveal itself to us in a way that will be harmonious and natural. And we have just to document this process of what we reveal through it. But you asked several questions, and I'll try to pick them, or you want to ask other questions?
No, I just want to say that the writers are usually like hunters. You have to catch the story. And but what I'm interested in is, well, it can wait. You can answer the questions first.
I wanted to answer a question. You asked if I write with a pencil or with a... First of all, I start writing with a pen, always. The first versions, I say versions because the way I write is very, I think, quite unusual, because I write many, many versions of every book. And when I say write, I mean first longhand, I mean in writing. I love the effort, I love the physical effort of writing. I want to feel it like a craft that I'm doing. And I write every book many, many, many times. Even when I move to the computer, I do not use the cut and paste, because I think that every time I either write or type a scene from the book, I understand it slightly different. I have a chance to see it from a slightly different point of view, and I think it's good for the story and it's good for me. And I remember once when I was writing, it was the book of intimate grammar, the Sefer HaDikduk HaPnimi. I remember I finished version number 12, and I came to my wife and I was so relieved, and I said, thank God this version is over. It was such a tough one. And she says, okay, and tomorrow you will start version number 13 in her very sober voice. And I said, yes, why is that? I asked her humbly, she's a psychologist. And she said, I don't know, why do you need it? So we did something strange. We went to the place where I write, and I just cut a certain paragraph that repeated itself in all the 12 versions. And I sellotaped them on the wall, kind of megalomaniac self-exhibition. And we went and we read from version 1 to version 12. Now, the differences between 1 and 3 were very big. You know, there were much more lines in number 1 than there were in number 3. And then, as we proceed to read, we saw that the differences became smaller and smaller and much more nuanced. Here there was a word that was needless to be written because the whole paragraph says it, so you do not have to stress it. Here there was something that was repetitive, or there was something that, an exclamation mark that is usually needless. And you could have seen slowly, gradually, how the musicality of this paragraph was created in an unconscious way. I do not think of it when I do it. I just feel something is wrong. And I try to tune myself towards the precise word or the precise nuance, until when we got to this version, to the last version, suddenly there was a feeling that the paragraph has been composed and maybe I should not touch it. Probably I did touch it after that again, because the next time I read it, the angle of my eye touching the page was different. But this is the process, and it's a strange process. It consumes a lot of time and a lot of energy, but as someone does not choose the way he speaks or the way he walks, this is how I write. And how is it for you? I mean, are you writing in versions, or you know already from the beginning how the story will unfold and what are the processes, what is the end of it?
That was my question for you, actually.
But I asked first.
Since I write mainly short stories, usually they are what they are. I mean, what I write in the first setting is the final version. I don't have time to go back to it. But when I write a novel, it takes a little bit longer. I write every day, but one page a day. No, not more, not less. 1 page. So I need 3 or 4 months to write a short novel. Since I write short stories, I also write short novels. But I would like to ask you a similar question. When you begin your novel, do you already know how it is going to end?
No, never. I do not want to know how it ends. I want the story to surprise me all the time, and even I wanted to say even to betray me, but actually maybe by betraying I mean that the story is more loyal to me than I dare to be. I want the book to take me, I want the book that I'm writing, the story that I'm writing, to take me to places that are, I learned this term just lately, my comfortability zone, my comfort zone, very American expression, yes. I want the story to take me to places where I don't know where I'm going to put my foot next, and that there will be things that are beyond my landscape, beyond my ability. I don't want to write as I know, but I want to write as I do not know. And therefore, I also, in almost every book of mine, I try to change the way of the narration. In this book, To the End of the Land, the beginning of it is it takes place in a hospital in Jerusalem in the beginning of the Six-Day War, and there are three young men and young women. There are 16 youngsters, and they are hospitalized in an isolation department because they have hepatitis B, and because it's war, everything has to be darkened, all the windows, as it used to be when we were at the Six-Day War, and they do not see themselves, they do not see each other, they just guess, and they speak in the dark, and it becomes like a radio play, and I love to write like a radio play. I wrote in my life hundreds of radio plays for the Israeli radio ever since I was a child. And in the book that came after this one, which is called Falling Out of Time, which is a kind of, this is something that David graciously translated, and it's a kind of an elegy, or also a choir, a libretto for a choir, and it tells about life after a loss of a child, and it's written in Hebrew, it's in rhymes even, not in other translations, because it's less acceptable in other languages. So it's like a very long poem, lamenting poem. And the book that I wrote later, that still is not translated here, either in Serbia or in Croatia, and it's called A Horse Walks into a Bar. It's the beginning of a joke, and it's actually a description of one night of a stand-up comedian. And the whole book is a stand-up comedy session, written in the most updated, obscene, extreme, vulgar slang of the Hebrew, with many jokes and many teasing of the audience and flirtation with the audience and all this dance between the artist and the audience. And again, it's written in totally different language from the book that came before it. And now, when I'm on the verge of starting hopefully something new, I also will try to find another way to tell it, or maybe I will think that it should be told in the most simple way. I also wrote books like that. The melody should fit the story, but sometimes it's so difficult to find this melody, and I think that my way of writing and rewriting, it's like with every version I take off another layer of cataract from my whole self that allow me to see the story that I'm telling and to understand the story that I'm telling and to understand why is it relevant for me, because I want in every story to understand what does it tell me, why is this story so sticking to me, because sometimes the stories that I start to write, I don't like them and I don't understand why they are relevant to me, and then while writing I understand that they are so essential to me, but I was unable or not courageous enough to look at it and to understand it.
If you have some that you don't want to send them to me.
It reminds me, David, I was asked some weeks ago, how did this idea came to you? And I said, if I knew where the good ideas live, where they are, I would stay there all my life. I would not leave this place.
When do you write? Do you write in the morning or in the evening, at night?
Whenever I have, whenever it's possible, I write. We wake up very early every day. My wife and I, we start every day at 5:45 in the morning, which is still dark, and we walk some kilometers in the hills around our home. We walk with a couple of friends and a dog. Of course, you cannot walk without a dog. And the dog is the dog that I put into this story. It's a smiling dog. It's amazing. It's a dog that has an expression of a smile. What is that to be so happy about at 6 in the morning in Israel? I don't know, but she keeps smiling all the time. Very optimistic dog. And then from 8 o'clock until 2 o'clock, I sit in a place out of home now. In the last years, I find it difficult to write at home. And I took a place some minutes drive away from my home, and I spend there 6 hours, usually walking. I don't know if I told you, but I have this strange thing. I cannot sit and write, especially not at this time when I'm still looking for the idea. I walk. I just walk some kilometers, I guess, but in one room. It's a very small place, but because of the strange structure, it has a corridor of 13 meters, and this is why I rented this place, because of the corridor, and it allows me to walk from the window to the door, back and forth, until I collapse or until I have a good idea, and then I sit and write it in my notebook, and then I keep walking. And my wife always says that I leave marks of burns on the carpet. It looks like a prisoner walking in prison. But again, I don't know another way to do it, so this is how I write. And then when I come home at 2 o'clock, after we eat, I will work again some hours if I'm lucky, if there's not too much pressure from the outside. But this is much less concentrated time, the time at home, because there are phones there, and there are other people, and there are all the temptations of a home. But the 6 hours in the morning are the most significant for me, and I really love being there.
How do your characters develop?
You assume that my characters develop. Sometimes they are totally stuck in their situation.
Well, then they leave you, I guess.
I insist on them until they give up. But well, you know exactly how it is to create a character. First of all, for me, it's physically. I mean, the way is physical. I need to know this character physically. I need to know how it walks, and how she or he walks, and how they talk, and if they are making movements with their hands, and how they make love, and how they eat, and how they sleep. And it has to go through the body first.
So how do you do it? You make a golem?
No. It's a nice idea. I just try not to defend myself from people that I know, people that I see on the street, and I try to, in a way, to absorb them. These times in the writing process are really very active, and you mentioned before hunters. I feel like a hunter when I need a face or a smile or a gesture. Be careful. I just take shamelessly. I remember when I was writing Someone to Run With, the story with the dog, I was unable to proceed for 2 or 3 months because I did not have the main character of Tamar, of the young woman Tamar, who is a kind of a singer in the street of Jerusalem. And I was walking in Jerusalem really hungry, looking for a girl that will look like her. And I was unable even to start it because I didn't have her. And then one day I entered into the computer store in our neighborhood mall. And there was a young woman, and she looked 16. I saw her from here, as if I am here. The camera is here, and I saw her jaw and part of her face, and there was something both very street-like and cheap even in her appearance. The jeans that she wore was torn here and here I saw, and worn out, and there was, at the same time, there was something very tender and frail about this part of her face. And immediately I looked at her and I knew this is my Tamar. And I remember I flew out of the store because I didn't want to hear her voice. I didn't need her voice. It's a very instrumentalized process. Because I had an idea of how she should sound, and I thought maybe she has a bad voice and she will ruin the image. And then I had it, and from the moment I had it, suddenly the whole character was there. I knew how Tamar is. I felt her really from within. I was able to become her. I was able to do things like she does. It's so much about the body, and also when I write, I always, I think I start from the body. I'll tell you a story, okay?
Yes, tell me a story.
I wrote a book called The Sea Under Love. I don't know how it is in Croatian or in Serbian.
Vidi pod ljubav.
And in this book there is a boy, Momik, who is the son of two survivors from the Shoah, and his mother, Gisela, is working on a sewing machine. One day after the book, well, some weeks after the book was printed in Israel, I was on a bus that went from Tel Aviv to Yerushalayim, Jerusalem. It was 7:30 in the evening. It was the end of the news magazine in the radio. The whole bus was darkened, and we all listened to the news magazine. And then towards the end of it, there was the culture corner. This is how it's called in Hebrew, pinat tarbut. You know, culture is so dangerous that it might overflow, so we have to corner it and limit it. And then suddenly, to my great pride and amazement, an Israeli actor, very famous one, Eli Gorlitsky, read excerpt from my book. And he read about Gisela, who is sitting in the winter night and sewing on the machine, and her foot rests on a wooden pedal that was added to the original pedal of the sewing machine. Now, at that very point, the driver, who was only human, couldn't take it anymore, and he switched to another station that was much more joyous and cheerful. And first of all, I was terribly hurt and insulted. And I sat there in the darkness, and then, after getting over my insult, I started to think, why did he read about this piece of wood? I don't remember that there was a piece of wood. Even more so, I remember my mother, when she was sewing on the zinger, there was this metal, long, wide, big pedal, but there was nothing added to it. So I came home, and immediately I took the book from the shelf, and I found the piece that Eli Gorlitsky read, and I saw some sentence later, I understood, because Gisela was very, very short woman, so her feet didn't reach the original pedal. So Uncle Shimek, who had good hands, and he also knew how to cheat on income tax, he fixed her this wooden pedal. And then suddenly I understood what literature is all about, because believe me, if in my home, at my home, there is something to be fixed, I'm not talking about things like sewing machine, but a broken shutter or a shelf to be installed or to fix a tap or something in the electricity. Small things that I know to do, but I never have time for it. And a week passes and another week, and my wife becomes bitter, and I start to receive all kind of hostile letters, and my status at my home, which is quite shaken to start with, deteriorates rapidly until I give up and I do it. But if you write a story and you have such a character like Gisela, who is short, who cannot reach the pedal, well, in a kind of totally spontaneous, unaware, even I just gave it to. I looked at the stories, thought, who can fix it? Okay, Shimek, come, do it. And Shimek fixed the external pedal. And I want to say even more than that. Let's assume that I would have not given her this extra wooden pedal. I assure you that if I read the book ever 20 years later, I would not have noticed that something is missing. But something would have been missing. I mean, her feet will not really reach the pedal. There will be a kind of a small void there, like that, no more. But here will be such a void, and there, and there, and there, and in the end, the reader feels intuitively that this writer has not killed himself on the story. But if you allow yourself to be Gisela, and I remember when I was writing Gisela, I became Gisela. I remembered how I thought how it is to come back from the Machne Yehuda market in the heart of Jerusalem with all the baskets, with her sick legs who are wrapped in bandages, and how difficult it was for her to climb on the first step of the buses. My father was a bus driver, so I knew very well what I'm talking about. There were chassons, special buses, very clumsy, that we got from France at this time of the 50s, and how hard it was for her to climb with the baskets, and the driver urges her to go faster and faster. I was her, and inevitably within me, like a tree makes fruit, it doesn't think of it, I gave her the additional pedal. So this, I think this is, for me, that was the time that I understood what writing is all about. And I think in that sense I'm maybe more sympathetic to my characters than to the people who live with me. I try to be, but I cannot, because it's a sense of obligation. You are the only one who will be able to give Gisela this extra pedal. No other one will do it for you. No other one will write your stories for you. You will not volunteer to write my stories, I assume.
Thank you. I remember that you told me that you sometimes write a poem or two. So there is a story I understand about the poem that became very popular.
Yeah, I wrote very, very few poems, let alone the poems of Falling Out of Time. But some years ago, many years ago actually now, it was after the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin. I remember I drove through a kind of secondary road from my home in Mevaseret to Jerusalem. It was just a day or two after the assassination. And I saw a car of settlers. It was very obvious, and in Israel we know what car is car of settlers. There are some characterizations to it, and one of them was the immense number of bumper stickers. Do you know what bumper sticker is? The writings that we sometimes glue to the car. Now in Israel, back then, I'm talking of almost 17 years ago, more than that, 22 years ago actually. It was very popular, the most popular and accessible way of expressing your political stand. And there were cars that were really covered with bumper stickers, and the bumper stickers in Jerusalem were the most fanatic, racist, and violent possible to suit the spirit of Jerusalem. And many of them, by the way, many of bumper stickers related to Yitzhak Rabin, who was then described by the right wing as a traitor, as someone who is selling Israel to the Palestinians. He should be killed, you know, explicitly, terrible things. And I drove and I saw this settler standing and with a screwdriver peeling off some of the bumper stickers. And then it struck me that in the end of this not so long line that starts with speeches of political leaders and go through bumper stickers, in the end of it will stand a man with a gun and will shoot. And then I started to collect bumper stickers. And I asked my friends and my kids and everyone that I knew to bring me bumper stickers that they saw, and I myself used to write. And in the end I had something like 150 slogans like that, bumper sticker. Then I thought, what if I rhymed them? And I started to organize it, and it went very smoothly somehow. And immediately it was very clear to me that this should be composed, but not in a melodic way, but through rap music. Because of the immediacy of the rap, because of the political dimension of rap, because of the vulgarity and violence that was in the bumper stickers and in the rap music. And I approached our best rap team, Hadag Nachash, and they composed it, and it became a hit for more than a year in the hit parade. And what was so interesting and thought-provoking is that I thought that I'm writing it as a kind of a leftist saying about the situation, but the right wing adopted those bumper stickers and they used to dance and to sing it in weddings. They just turn it upside down and turn it against me, and they got so much pleasure of the violence that is embedded in these bumper stickers. So this was one of the lyrics that I wrote.
Yeah, it seems that we have to be careful when we try to write something for somebody, and one is never really too sure who will the somebody be. It can be your enemy, as it seems to be in the case of your poem. But I would like to change this line of conversation with the questions that have something to do with what Mika said at the beginning. She said that, if I'm not mistaken, that this is the week of refugees. And she also mentioned that today is actually a state holiday. It's excuse me? Yes, the day when the fight against fascism began in Croatia. So, could you say something about those two things? I mean, do you think that the fight against fascism is useless, or on the contrary?
Even if it was useless, it was not redundant. But I don't think it's useless. Fascism approaches or addresses very primal layers of humankind, and in order to resist it, you have to put some energy and a lot of thought. It's very tempting to collaborate with fascism because it divides the world in a very simple and comfortable way. It allows you to demonize the other, to idealize yourself. It tells you that existentially you are better than others, and it gives you all kind of justification to the most terrible acts that people are able to inflict on other people. You know, I think everything that I said now today about how to create a character in a way defies the fascist way of thinking, the stereotypical prejudice way of looking at people that fascists do have. Because in order to be a fascist, you have to generalize. In order to be a soldier of any army, you have to generalize. You have to erase the face of your enemy, and in a way, by erasing the enemy, you erase part of yourself, the part that is meant to notice the nuances of other human being. War generalize, writing specifies, love specifies. You specify one human being when you are in love from all humanity, and you pour all your intention towards this human being, and by so doing, you, in a way, you create this human being, and you create yourself within the couplehood in this human being. And again, the act of fascism, the machinery of the fascism, is the machinery of generalization, of using a language that is not nuanced, that is, it's a language of drums and trumpets instead of the more nuanced and tuned language that we use in literature, but that I think we have to use whenever we talk about what happens in our public sphere. It's our responsibility. There is a responsibility for which language we use. Europe now is undergoing the immense phenomena of the refugees, of the waves of migration. And it's a great challenge. It's really a great challenge and a great test, because almost the natural, maybe, the instinctive reaction is not to look. Not to look. And we are so trained in not looking. We have a certain way of looking, which is peeping, There is a lot of pleasure in peeping into the hell of others, a pleasure that is hard to resist sometimes. On this pleasure, most of the media today is built, of our attraction to peep into the hell of others for a second. Because if you look for more than a second, you become committed in a way. And who wants to be committed to the hell of others? We have enough troubles of ourselves. And yet, maybe I say because I come from a people of refugees. And my father and my grandmother, they were refugees that have been uprooted from Poland, and they desperately knocked on doors until they found Palestine and came and started their life there. And I know how many times in my life I had to force myself to look. I remember one example. Something like 15 years ago, there was a clash in the south of Hebron. Hebron is in occupied territories, and the army and the settlers threw away from their home families of Palestinians who live in caves. They live in caves under the ground. This is their traditional way of life. They don't want to change it. They don't want to go to live in homes. But it happened to be in a place that the army wanted to use for trainings, so they just uprooted them. And I came the morning later, and I saw the families sitting on their mattresses and all their so poor belongings spread around them. And I remember the reluctance to look at it, because I knew if I look at it, I in a way I would be caught there. And there was this child, I think he was either 8 or 9 or 10, and he sat there on a mattress next to his mother. The mother didn't look at me, but he looked at me. And I will not forget his look. There was so much hatred and accusation and something deep and primal that I don't even have a word for it. And because of the look of this child, I became committed to the struggle of those Palestinians in South Hebron for years, writing about it and visiting them, until other things, other symptoms of the illness of our occupation captured me. But the refugees that are pouring now deserve to be looked at, and not only to be looked at for a second, but really we can have a look at them that will give them again their humanity and their dignity. They deserve it. There are people like us who are trapped in a calamity. They did not choose it. It was imposed on them. It can happen to every one of us, and you live here in a country that experienced things like that. We know how fragile our routine and our comfortability is. We know it. We all can be in the same situation, and it's such kind of a human obligation. I'm not even using the word moral, just human, to grant them their individuality again, to redeem them from the misery of the state of the refugee.
I mean, it's easier not to, as we have, it's easier not to look properly.
Yeah.
And it has been the case for ages, as we all know. And in this easy, it's a little bit of fear as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I do not deny the fear, but we also have to overcome our fears if we want to have life. Yes, I come from a reality that fears dominate us and dictate every step that we do. I come from a reality with, our Prime Minister Netanyahu is a genius in confusing together the real dangers that Israel faces with the echoes of the past trauma. And we, the Israelis, as a traumatized society, we are totally helpless in front of such manipulation. I know what fears can do to people. I know how fears can crush down people and narrow mind them. I know it. I mean, a lot of energy is taken to act against the gravity of fear. Yeah.
I have one question left, and after that maybe we can hear some questions from the audience. But what I wanted to ask you is, I noticed that every novel you wrote, that each novel is different from the previous ones. Is there some intention in that? Are you trying to create a new form, the best possible form for a novel?
Yeah, I will try to find the best form that will suit this novel, but first I have to know what the story is about. Right now, for example, in the last 4 months, I walk and try to find the best of. I have 3 ideas for 3 different novels. Now I cannot integrate them. I would be happy if I could, but they are unintegratable with each other. And I just wait for one of them to take over me in a way that I will not be able to refuse. But it takes time, and it's not. I cannot decide which story I will choose, and it's such a strange situation because I go, I walk, and I think, and suddenly one of the 3 is bursting forward, and it's like a horse in the race, and all my life is colored with the color of this story, and I pour with ideas all the time, and the other 2 ideas, they just fade out, they die. But then at night, one of them can come with another good idea, and he is the first one, and all the other 2 are fading out. So I'm just really very obediently, I wait for one of them to be more solid in me, yes, and then I know that this is the story that I should write, and usually the other 2, usually I start writing like that there are some, not usually 3, usually it's only 2, but one of them will fade out and I will never be able to go back to it. I cannot warm this dish twice, unfortunately. And I guess that this is something that I need, like stairs to climb, and then there is the beginning of the story, and then my life will change, and I will start to be obsessed, and I will not be able to do other things, but just to be with it. But there is also something so pleasurable about this phase of the writing, because everything is possible. Everything is open. The moment I have the idea, and I know this is the idea, and I start to write the first line, things starts to narrow down. Suddenly it's part of reality. It's a story that the writer writes. It's not this air of almost flying that I can have in these periods.
I have another question, and then we hear from the audience. But I'm dying to ask you this. When I was working on the translation of Sea and the Love, there is a whole section on Bruno Schulz, and that was the real challenge to translate, because of all the fishing in that chapter. So, what is the meaning behind that? What is the meaning of the story of Bruno Schulz jumping into cold water near Danzig, right?
You know, I was 3 days ago, I was in Montenegro, and a man approached me and he said that he read in Serbian Sea and the Love, and he said it reads as if it was written in Serbian. So I owe you this compliment.
But you still have to explain the fish.
I'm trying to find a way out of it. It's hard to explain how a respectable writer like Bruno Schulz tend to be a fish. I'll tell you a story. Okay? That's what we are for.
Yes.
When I finished my first novel, it was called The Smile of the Lamb. It was a novel about the occupation, the first novel to be written in Hebrew about the Israeli occupation of the Palestinians. People started to react, and Israel is a very democratic place. Everyone will tell you by whom you were inspired or from whom you stole, very straightforwardly. One day a man called Daniel Shilit called me. He was an immigrant from Poland, and he said, "But of course you are influenced by Bruno Schulz." Now it sounded like a compliment, so I didn't argue, but I never read Bruno Schulz before that. But of course I was inspired by him, because great writers are in the air. We are all inspired by them, even without having read them. And that evening I told this anecdote at the house of good friends, and they said, "Yes, but we have the book here of Bruno Schulz translated to Hebrew. The stores of cinnamon." Yeah.
Right.
And I took it and I started to read it the next day in the morning, and I was unable to let it go. And I felt I met, a big brother who is a real genius. Because in the writing of Bruno Schulz, in every paragraph, there is an explosion of reality and dream and nightmare and imagination and passion, and all the infinite options of our existence. And I read it, you know how lovers read a letter as if it's directed only to them, yes? I saw it as a love letter that he sent to me. That's how I felt. And then I go to the epilogue in the end of the book, where one of the translators, Yoram Brunovsky, described the life and the death of Bruno Schulz that until then I didn't know anything about him. And there was this anecdote that is very famous, but probably not true, but who cares? Anecdotes become real after a while, because they remain so popular because they fit to the topic they tell about. And it says that when the Nazis invaded Drohobych, the hometown of Bruno Schulz, he became a kind of a slave of a Nazi commander, and he used to paint. He was a painter also. He was a teacher in the gymnasium of Drohobych. And he painted all kind of drawings on the wall of this Nazi commander. And this Nazi commander had an enemy, another Nazi commander. They quarreled about money or cards or I don't know what. One day, the enemy of the employer, quote unquote, of Bruno Schulz met Bruno Schulz in the corner of Chatske and Mickiewicz streets, pulled his gun and shot him dead, and came to the employer and told him, "I killed your Jew." "Very well," was the answer. "Now I'll kill your Jew." Now, I read this phrase and I freaked out. I just felt I don't want to live in a world that allows such monstrous language, that such a thought is even possible. And I remember I left home, and for some hours I wandered in a little wood near, I lived back then in Jerusalem, like in a fog I was. And I knew that I want to write a story that will, in a way, will take revenge on this, not only on the terrible murder, but on the terrible way that it was described. This unbearable contradiction between the richness, the multi-layeredness of the writing of Bruno Schulz, and this terrible, sterile, flat sentence, I kill your Jew, now I'll kill your Jew, as if people are replaceable. And I remember I came back and I told my wife, I said, I will write a book that would shiver on the shelf, that will have so much vitality and imagination that it will be like 1/1,000,000th of a life of a human being. And in my book, there are 4 parts of it. In the first one, there is about a child who raises the Nazi beast because he wants to change it, to make it change and change its ways so it will stop tormenting all the grown-ups around him. And the second part is about Bruno Schulz, but in my story I smuggled him under the nose of the historians and the literary critics to the harbor of Danzig, where he jumped into the sea and joined a school of salmon fish. Why salmon? Because of the very unusual cycle of life of salmon fish. You know, they hatch from the eggs in sweetwater river somewhere in the north of Scotland, and then they go to the salty water of the ocean and they swim for 1-2 years until suddenly they got a kind of a pulse in their brain, and the whole school, you say, or shoal, I don't know, they turn and they start to swim back to the very place where they were born, and they swim against falls and against bears that are hunting them and fishermen that hunt them by the millions, until they get to the very place where they hatch and they lay eggs and they die. And I felt that it's very Jewish, first of all, you know, this idea of coming back to your very, very homeland, and also to leave it immediately to another journey. And I felt that the salmon are like, you know, it's like a fable dressed up in flesh. It says something that I wanted to understand, this journey, this needless journey over the sea. What are they telling when they are doing, what are they writing on the waves when they are doing this journey? And my Bruno joined them. And he got some answers about himself and about the role of creation against the arbitrariness and the narrow-mindedness of I kill your Jew, now I'll kill your Jew. And the book, this part of the book is written like a stream of consciousness of the sea. And the sea in my novel is it's a huge prehistoric female. Not very clever, but she has an enormous ability to love, and she fell in love with this small human being that suddenly penetrated her, burning with passion, Bruno Schulz. And she tells about this love affair to one human being. So I don't know if this explains anything. It must sound very strange, but I hope that in the book it has some reasoning.
Well, readers will have to read the book in order to find out.
Thank you, David.